Hey guys, welcome back. We're getting started right here after lunch, so we want to do something a little special here and just keep the energies flowing, keep us moving on this path that we're on. So I'm really excited to bring on Cassandra, who's going to walk us through some EFT tapping stuff today, which is cool. We're going to actually go along with her and do the thing. So. She's owned a yoga school, a magic school, which is fun, and so it's just a really amazing person and a great friend, and she is incredibly powerful woman, and is just really can help heal people through the work she does, and so excited to have her to just take us through something and kind of get the energies moving after lunch. And so I'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. I'm so happy to be here. Hello, friends. I'm Cassandra, and I am here to share with you EFT tapping, which is such an amazing technique. I feel so blessed that I get to share it with you today. And you don't need to know actually much about EFT in order to do it, which I think is really awesome. It's a 30-year-old practice. It's a combination of American psychology and Chinese medicine. So it's really that East meets West feel, which I love. And what's cool about it is there's plenty of science behind it. And if that's something that interests you, you can definitely go look up articles about it. But it works like magic. And that's what's so amazing about it to me, is that it just makes you feel better. So I discovered it about 8 years ago, and I've been using it ever since. It really just tunes the nervous system in a way that I haven't found many other practices can do, especially when you learn how to do it by yourself. You don't always need a practitioner. But I'm super happy here to share with you. So before we dive into the tapping, I do want to talk a little bit about why we're here, and that's hope. And more than just hope as a concept that we think about in our minds, I want to think about it. How does hope feel inside of our bodies? I do think that hope is a feeling. It's an emotion. And so I just want to ask you right now to close your eyes and take a moment to remember a time in your life when you truly felt hopeful. And see if you can drop into your body and just, what does hope feel like to you? What does your body feel like when you are feeling hopeful about the future? And to me, when we feel hope inside of our bodies, there's really no question about the future being great. It's certainty. It's that sense of inner knowing that everything's going to be okay. So having hope, is really believing that we as individuals and as human beings can prevail through dark times. And for many of us, these are the darkest times we've seen, especially those of us who are maybe on the younger side, millennials, Gen Z. And so right now, there is a lot of darkness in the world. And that darkness can block our view of the bright and hopeful future that most certainly does exist. I believe it does. But that darkness is something that's inside of all of us. And of course, we see it outside of us in the world events. And to me, the only way to truly feel hope inside of our bodies, in our hearts, in our inner knowing, is to feel all of the yucky emotions that are in the way of us really accessing that inner knowing that we all have. Those yucky emotions are despair, our grief, our sadness, and shame. And to me, these emotions are taking up literal space inside of our bodies. They affect our electromagnetic field. In other words, our aura, right? That our heart and our brain emit electric energy. And just the same way that a whole lot of dust inside your laptop affects its function, a whole lot of emotional residue, which is actual chemicals, hormones, clogging up the systems in our body, cause problems. It takes up space. And when all the space is full of despair, we don't have very much room to experience hope and bliss and joy. So I'm here to support you in accessing that hope, that bliss, and that joy, right? So let's just take a couple deep breaths together right now. Just wiggle around in your seat. Just feel whatever part of you is touching the floor or your chair. Feel the air around you on your skin. Just close your eyes for a moment and we'll do 3 big deep breaths together just to get centered, just to fully arrive in the space that we're in. When you're ready, inhale deeply and then let it out. And again, inhale and release. And we'll do 1 more like that, breathing in and letting it go. And just notice now, even after those few breaths, maybe you feel a little more present. Maybe you feel like you've arrived in your body. Okay, so we'll do a little more work with that as we flow. So now I just want you to ask yourself, what is in the way of you being completely and totally willing to take action on your personal values? Okay, that to me is hope. That brings us into that space of hope. Like, I am willing to take action. I am willing to make the future better because I matter, right? So that's the question. What upsetting emotions are in the way of you feeling hopeful? And that's what we're going to work with right now. So let's start to dive into the tap. And I want you, if you're willing, to play along with me, to bring to mind the most uncomfortable emotion that you're dealing with in your life right now. Okay, so some of those emotions might be, as I mentioned earlier, anxiety, fear, anger, irritation, sadness, numbness is an emotion, guilt, okay, anything like that. And you might have something different. Okay, go ahead and use that for yourself. So this is sort of like a call and response journey. And I'll say things in a rhythmic way. And if you're willing, you'll repeat them out loud to yourself. And you'll also be filling in the blank. So sometimes I'll ask you to feel things. Sometimes I'll ask you to visualize things. And sometimes I'll ask you questions that you can answer. Okay, so it's possible that you might cry a little bit. It's possible that you might yawn or feel sleepy. All of those are normal things. And what's cool about having any of that biofeedback is that we know that it's working. We know that energy is moving. Okay, so I'm going to show you some tapping points really quick and you're going to follow along with me. I'm going to tap on myself. You're going to tap on yourself. You don't actually have to have your eyes open. You can close them if that feels better to you, and I'll guide you when to move on. So the first spot is the chest. Using the fingertips, tap on the chest. Yeah, you can just breathe and we'll start moving the energy right now because we're just going to dive right in from here. Big deep breath. Let it go. Awesome. And then the second point is right here on the front of the ribs. Might be a little tender. Yep, right there. And then sides of the ribs. Okay. And the wrist. I'm just going through them really quickly. We're going to cycle through all these again and again though. And the finger. So on the finger, right where your nail and your fingertip kind of meet, that corner area. And the same thing on all the fingers except the ring fingers. So you'll just move to the middle. The ring finger is the other side. That's the only one that's different. And then to the pinky and the side of the hand. Okay, and then top of the head. You don't have to remember these. I'll tell you where to go next. Tapping on the forehead and tapping on the temples and under the eyes. Yeah, cheekbones. And then under the nose, under the lips, on the chin, and then back on the chest. We cycle through just like that. And if you're tapping somewhere, it will work. So if you decide you need to tap on your jaw or some other part of your body, just listen to your intuition, go for it, okay, while we're doing this. So here we go. Close your eyes. We're going to do 3 more breaths. When you're ready, big inhale. Release again. You can sigh it out. One more time. And go ahead and start tapping on your chest. Now choose your emotion, your sadness, your grief, your despair, whatever that is for you right now. It might be more than one. Drop down into your body. Feel that emotion inside your body. Okay. And then go ahead and repeat after me. This feeling of, what's the feeling you're feeling? This feeling of, and they're saying it out loud, this feeling of, and you're moving down to the rib point. One more time. This feeling of, repeating that. This feeling makes me think, and now just say some things that your feelings are making you think about. Negative things, negative thoughts that you repeat to yourself. Some of us repeat things to ourselves like, I just can't do this, or this is too hard. The world is scary. Things are bad. You know, any negative phrases that you find yourself repeating and validating inside your body, bring those to mind. We're tapping on the sides of the ribs and feel what it's like to say those things to yourself. Our body's always listening. We're always listening to our thoughts. We're always listening to the things that we say. Let yourself feel what that's like. Good. Let's take a big breath. Move that energy out. We'll tap on the wrist. All these negative things that I'm saying, go ahead and repeat that. All these negative things that I'm saying to myself are making me feel bad. These negative things are making me feel worse. Good. And tapping on the thumb. I thought that by saying these negative things to myself, you can repeat that I would feel better. Tapping on the next finger. And that's just not happening. Let's breathe. Good. And just noticing how sometimes we say things to ourselves to protect ourselves from disappointment or uncertainty, but they really don't help. Okay, so let's try this. Repeating after me. Move to your next finger. Even though I feel, and just say that negative emotion again. It might be a new one now. Even though I feel, I love and accept myself. Try that. Even though I feel, say your emotion. I know I'm still a good person. And moving to the next finger, other side. Even though I feel, say your emotion. I respect myself. And let yourself feel that self-respect. Being here right now, being willing to feel some of this stuff is a way to show your self-respect. Okay, tapping on the next finger. Let's just check in. We said we love and accept ourselves. Now, I just want to know, do you? Do you love and accept yourself? Tapping on the side of the hand. See if you can be really honest. You know, you might have just said it because I told you to, which thank you for playing along. But you might also feel like you love and accept yourself, right? So let's tap on the head. I'm sure there's a part of you that does. I'm sure there's a part of you that loves and accepts yourself. So let's just acknowledge that. Go ahead and say that. There's a part of me that loves and accepts myself, right? And then tapping on the forehead. But there's a part of me that doesn't. So let's just acknowledge that little part, however small, that doesn't all the way love and accept ourselves, okay? Big deep breath right here. Good. I'm tapping on the temples. Even though I don't love and accept myself all the way yet, I know I'm still a good person. Okay. Validating ourselves here in this space. So tapping under the eyes, what is in the way of you accepting yourself fully? What is in the way? Maybe it's an emotion, maybe it's a memory, maybe it's a story. Okay, tapping under the nose. Now just check in to see what emotion is there wrapped up with the story. What emotion is there wrapped up with the memory, if you can. And then just repeat it. I feel, however you feel right now. I feel, say it aloud. I'm tapping on the chin. I feel, however you feel. Okay, so if I love and accept myself all the way right now, I'm afraid that what might happen, tapping on the chest. So what might happen? What might go wrong If we just love ourselves as we are, with all of our flaws, with all the things that we perceive that are wrong, what might happen? Big breath, everybody. Good. And tapping on the ribs, front of the ribs. You don't have to do more or be more to receive your love. I'm here to remind you of this. You do not have to do more or be more to receive your love. Okay? So just notice how you feel right now. Observe your energy. Maybe you feel a little lighter. Maybe you feel a little better, tapping on the sides of the ribs. So give yourself some gratitude for doing some work. You did amazing. You've done some work. You felt some stuff, felt some feelings, felt some emotions, removed some energy here. Big breath, everybody. Good. So let's just check in. Maybe there's still some yucky stuff in there. Maybe there's still some bad feelings in there. We'll move to our wrists. So now just drop in again into your body. Wiggle around in your seat and just feel your body, feel your energy. Tune into that emotion that you said earlier. Now, it might have morphed into something else. And if it's something else now, just acknowledge that, okay? Tapping on the thumb. What does that emotion feel like in your body? Just like we connected to hope earlier, we're going to connect to the yuckiness that's in front of that hope that's inside of us. So what is that emotion? Okay, tapping on the next finger, we're saying it out loud. I feel, what do you feel? I feel, one more time, I feel. Okay, now dropping into the body, what parts of your body are having sensations right now while you feel this emotion? So many times people in anger are feeling in the jaw or in the belly. Anxiety is in the chest. Other places, so you might feel it somewhere else. Those are just some ideas of what you can tap into. What does it feel like for you? We moved fingers. We're on the ring finger, other side. Okay. What are the sensations that you're feeling in your body? See if you can visualize it. You can close your eyes if you're not. Tapping on the pinky now. Let yourself feel it. And we're doing another breath while we feel our bodies here. Good. Even though I feel, just repeating after me, that emotion or that sensation, even though I feel, I love and accept myself. Okay, starting to see the pattern here. Even though I feel, I love and accept myself. Amazing. Tapping on the head, big breath. We'll do one more pass. Even though I feel, how do you feel? Even though I feel, I love and accept myself. Okay, tapping on the forehead, repeating after me. It's perfectly understandable that I would feel this way. Let's give ourselves some understanding. Okay, repeating, anyone who's been through what I've been through would feel how I feel. Okay, we're all human. We have feelings. Tapping on the temples. It's really understandable. Let's give ourselves some of that compassion, some of that love and care. Repeating after me, even though I feel, say it again, even though I feel, I know I'm going to be okay. I know I'm going to be okay. Good, tapping under the eyes. Now think about how you want to feel. Maybe it's hopeful. Maybe it's happy, and tapping under the nose. Maybe you want to access energy and confidence. Okay, so whatever it is for you, just tune into that. How do you want to feel? We want to feel inspired, right? So we'll just repeat after me when you're ready. I really want to feel what? What do you really want to feel? Tapping on the chest. I really want to feel bliss. I really want to feel joy. I really want to feel hopeful. Okay, whatever it is for you, just repeating that. I really love the idea of trusting myself. I really love the idea of trusting myself. So let's just take a moment to check in again, tapping on the ribs. We've done some work. We've moved some energy. Notice where you're at. And let's see if we can do a little comparison to where you are right now with this emotion compared to how you were about 20 minutes ago. Okay, so just notice. It might feel a little lighter. Sometimes it feels a little worse, it feels a little heavier, and sometimes we need more time, okay? So you might feel a little worse. Either way, when you're ready, tapping on the sides of the ribs, even though I still feel a little yucky, I love and accept myself. Okay, even though I still feel a little bit bad, I love and accept myself. Good, I'm tapping on the wrist. Big deep breath. Now let's play a little game. Let's just imagine that we're gonna hold on to this yucky emotion for another 5 years. Okay, so we're gonna live our life in this emotion, tapping on the next finger for 5 more years, and just see what that would feel like to your body to go through your life 5 more years with this. Okay, probably doesn't feel so nice, but we get to stay safe. We get to stay the same. We get to be in our comfort, and maybe that's a trade-off, right? Next finger. Add 15 years to that, okay? So it's been 15 years that we've been in this despair. We've been in this grief. We've been holding on. We've been living our life in this paradigm for another 15 years, okay? Next finger. Just how does that feel to you? Just stay with it if you can. Big breath, everybody. Okay, add 20 years to that. So we're getting old. We're getting up there. We're still in our despair. We're still in our grief. We're holding on. We're dwelling in this, okay? Our life illustrates that we've been in this energy for a long time. Tapping on the next finger. But we get to hold on. We get to stay the same. And for some of us, that feels really good. That feels safe. I'm tapping on the side of the hand. All right, we're really old. We're so old. We're 105. We're on our deathbed now. We're looking around us. Maybe not too many people with us. We've been holding on to this story that's been keeping us small and sad and low for many years. Go ahead and tap on your head. And just look back on your life. What would it feel like to have gone through your whole life like this? Maybe we feel regret, okay? Maybe we know that we wasted our potential. Let yourself see it. Let yourself feel it. You're doing great. Big breath. Good, tapping on the forehead. So now that we've seen it, now that we've watched our whole lives while holding on to this sadness, this despair, my guess is that we are feeling like maybe it's time to let it go. Okay, tapping on the temples. My guess is that we're seeing that we don't need to live like this. We can totally let this go, right? So let's just say that, tapping under the eyes. I can totally let this go. And tapping under the nose. I'm willing to move through these emotions. Okay. Tapping on the chin. I'm willing to open my heart. I'm willing to practice being hopeful. Tapping on the chest. We can let hope be a practice. I can totally do this. Just repeating that, feeling that, letting your energy start to bubble up, tapping on the ribs. I can feel hopeful. I can feel hopeful. I am capable of this, right? Tapping on the sides of the ribs. I'm willing to have hope for the future. I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to be a beacon of hope for future, right? I am willing to be hopeful for our world. Okay, tapping on the wrist. I can totally make a difference. Affirm that for yourself. I can totally make a difference. Tapping on the thumb. Because I matter, right? You matter. I matter. We matter. Tapping on the next finger. I love myself and I accept myself. Okay. I'm tapping on the next finger. So maybe I won't get it all right today. Just repeating that. Maybe I won't get it all right today. Next finger. But that's okay. but that's okay, because I'm going to keep practicing. I'm going to keep going. I can totally do this. Okay, tapping on the side of the hand. I am hopeful. I'm hopeful for the future. I'm ready to take action. I'm ready to do something that's going to make a difference in my world. Okay. All right, now that we're feeling a little more ready, a little more hopeful, let's start to shake it out. So we're just going to shake the body, shake the arms, shake the face, shake the legs, get a little shimmy going here. Yes, feel it, feel it. Just wiggle it out. Okay. And now reach your arms out and up. Inhale. Stretch it up. Exhale, bring your hands down to your heart. Feel your heart. We're going to do it again. Inhale, reach it up. Hands come into the heart. Feel the heart. One more. Inhale. Bring it down. Good. And now just keep your eyes closed. Bring your hands to your heart. Rest your hands right on your heart so you can feel it beating. Notice your breath right now. Notice your energy. Breathe slowly and gently. In your mind, just tell yourself you love yourself. Give yourself gratitude for taking this time to be with yourself in this intimate way. And just know that anytime you're feeling that despair or that grief, you can tap in and tune in to yourself, to your body, and to your heart. Move through the despair, move through the grief. And hope is on the other side. And you can know that within yourself. You can hold that in your heart. And I hold that for all of you. So when you're ready, you can just blink open the eyes, release the hands. And I do recommend that you drink some water after this. I do recommend that if you feel tired, you rest if you can. The guidance is that you do not take alcohol today. If that's something that you are able to do, I recommend just letting yourself be with your natural energy for the rest of the day. And I just want to thank you all so very much for letting me hold space for you, for letting me guide you, for letting me be here. And I'm super thankful to Tim and Dave and the Global Hope Summit for having me.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah, thank you so much for leading us all through that. And definitely such a good skill to learn. And you know, all these recordings are going to be coming out, so you guys might want to steal this one and and do it a few times. So I love it. So really appreciate all your work and what you're doing here. I know you're doing some pretty epic things in the world, making some pretty big changes right now, along with everybody else. So, which it's just been exciting to watch you do that. So, where can people find out more about what you're up to, and where can they connect with you if they'd like?
Well, they can find me on Instagram. Cassandra Vitale is my handle. So that's my name. You can find me on Facebook, same thing. Just search my name. I've got my website up, CassandraVitale.com. So you can find me on the internet.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, really appreciate you coming on here today, and we'll keep things moving here. But thank you so much for this activity, and it was awesome to just kind of break up the energy of the day. So
thanks so much for having me, Tim. Bye.
Bye. Awesome. I'm excited to be back with you guys, and I've got RJ Johnson here. Very, very amazing man. He's done a lot of different things in his life, from owning a big bank, or at least managing a big bank. I think you were president or vice president of a big bank, and on through that process went down a crazy life full of stress. And I think what he has to talk about is so important to what we're experiencing today, because all of us are dealing with massive amounts of stress. And RJ actually released a book called The 7 Secrets to a Stress-Free Life, which is amazing. I'm sure he's going to cover some of that today. But really a lot of impactful things he's been through, from there. I won't tell all his story, but I know that he's been through and handled drug addiction, a divorce, like a lot of various things that he's come out on the other side of, and learned really effectively how to deal with stress in really tough situations. And excited to hear what you have to share on that, RJ, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Tim. In 1995, at the height of a banking career, as Tim mentioned, I was treasurer of the bank, actually, and I was managing about $5 billion. It was extremely stressful, a lot of pressure on me, and I started to take prescription pills, and soon thereafter, that turned into a full-blown drug addiction. So I ended up in a psychiatric hospital, of all places, and I spent 2 years in rehab, and from there even was still not on a path to a positive life, and ended up going back down a dark path. And I reached a point where I'd given up on life, actually, and had started contemplating ways that I could self-destruct. But at that point in time, I was married and I had 3 beautiful daughters. And as I looked at them, I just knew that I had to find a way to turn my life around. And I began that journey. And somewhere in the early 2000s, between the 90s and the 2000s, I went on an intense journey of searching for some way to turn my life around. I looked at everything from metaphysics, self-help books, 12-step groups, therapy, and a number of other modalities, even Native American, shaman type activities, everything that I could do to try and change the way I approach life. Over most of those years, these programs that I went to were not particularly effective, but once in a while, I would discover one thing that could really impact my life and move it forward in a positive way. And by 2012, I had developed a philosophy that included 7 fundamental principles of how I could live life in any circumstances and maintain satisfying, a complete, a whole, fulfilling life. And sometimes it's happy, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's tough, and sometimes it goes smoothly. So those are the vicissitudes of life. But no matter what those emotions are, underlying that is a sense of calm, a sense of confidence, a sense of understanding, and the knowledge that my life is going to be okay. So I wanted to share today a little bit about that philosophy and those principles, and talk about how I implemented them, and maybe give you some strategies on what you could do if you're suffering right now from emotional distress. So just to give you an example, in March, as you know, the COVID locked us all down. I live in California. It was especially harsh type of lockdown that we did here. And I had a lot of friends that, they lost their jobs, they lost their income. Even if they didn't have the COVID, they had health problems, and they had family problems. One of my friends, parent, the father had the COVID. He was in a senior living facility. They wouldn't let my friend in there, and his father died with nobody at his side. So definitely some situations that could cause people to have serious emotional distress. So if any of you are feeling that right now, all I can tell you is that however things went for me, I had a confidence, I had a belief, I had faith that it would come out, I would come out on the other side, and I would look back on this experience and realize that there was a guiding hand of some force, some power that I'll talk about a little later, and that has guided my life. And that from here point forward, these experiences will help me, let's just say, fulfill my destiny. Each of us have a life purpose. Each of us do eventually reach a destiny. And the question is, what kind of destiny do you want to have? And how can you get there with the life purpose that you were meant to live? And the only way we can discover our life purpose is we need to peel away all of these emotional difficulties, all of these mind programs of negativity, self-loathing, and low self-esteem, and victimization, and some of the other things that really cause us to be mentally bound down. So let me start by revealing just a couple of the principles that really became important to me and that were the beginning of something that helped to change my life. So the first principle that I discovered came up when I realized that the whole world seemed to have gone into this victim mentality. Look around. Who is taking responsibility when something happens? Don't we always have to sue someone? Somebody's to blame for a problem that I have, and therefore I need to get some sort of compensation. And what I realized is, in talking to people, even those that had been actually harmed and did feel that they needed some justice, the process of getting that justice, whether there was a person who had harmed them that was being brought to a legal or criminal justice, that process was not fulfilling. That process was not easy, and it was emotionally in huge turmoil. And even if they got a monetary award, it never was a sense of satisfaction that they could move on. And so what I talked to them about is, what would happen if, instead of being the victim and needing the other people to admit they're wrong and the other people to acknowledge and beg forgiveness and things like that, what if I, or you in this case, to the person I'm talking to, took the responsibility and said, yes, the circumstances were out of my control, but how I choose to respond to those circumstances are within my control. So here's a story that I think is appropriate here to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. At some point, some years ago, I was taking the bus. I decided I wanted to commute to downtown Los Angeles, and taking the bus is a good way to do it because you don't have to fight the LA traffic and so on. But I needed to get to the bus stop, so I would drive my car to the bus stop. So one day, as I parked and I was waiting for the bus, I looked over and I saw the sign by my car, and it said, "Street sweeping on Tuesdays, no parking." And of course it was Tuesday. And I knew these tickets, if you park there, are expensive, at least $100 or more. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I realized at that moment I had a great little brainstorm. I could get back in my car. I could drive maybe 2 or 3 stops down the road and park where it would be okay, and catch the bus there and still make it all the way downtown. I'm thinking, my higher power, as we called it, or my own insight, that I could, still achieve what I wanted to achieve. Well, work ends, I'm taking the bus back, I get back to my car, and guess what? Somebody had hit my car and taken off. So instead of a $100 ticket, I now had a $500 or $600 car expense. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if I had it to do over again, I would have just been thankful to only have a ticket. But at the time, I thought, a ticket would not be in my best interest as far as moving forward in life. So once I had that experience, and I recount it because it was really mind shifting for me. I started to see that, how do I know what experiences I'm having if I interpret it as a bad experience or something negative that's going to affect my life in a way that I won't like? How do I know that, actually? Because I don't know what's going to happen down the road, in which, had some other alternative path happened, that might have taken me to a whole different life experience, like the butterfly effect. And I just began to believe, however my life was going, whether it seemed a positive experience or it seemed a tough experience, a learning experience, failure or something like that, I could look at that and say, that's preparing me or guiding me to something that down the road, I'm going to be able to look back and say, I'm really glad that happened. So one of the gifts of the principles that I developed is that I have no regrets for anything in my life, because going all the way back to the time I was born, every single event that happened every second of every day moved me in a particular direction that led me to this moment in this conference right now and the opportunity to share with you. And right now, my life, despite the COVID and some of these other things you'd think, life could be difficult. I'm here to tell you that today, right now, I am at the best place I've ever been in my life. And I'm talking about psychologically, mentally, spiritually, and I just wouldn't want to be any other person. So when I talk to Tim and other people, and it sounds a little bit arrogant, but I say, I really love me. There's no other person I would rather be than myself, because I'm so full of this gratitude and this understanding of how my life is just so blessed. And what I'd like to share with you is, the first thing was, if you want to have that kind of a life, and in the midst of difficulties like this COVID, lost your job, health problems, relationship problems, no matter what the situation is, it is possible to look at the situation and flow through it, as I like to tell Tim, like a leaf on the river, and just trust that the river is taking me somewhere. It's not always a calm, just floating down the center. Sometimes there's rapids that we just get, crazy life going. And sometimes the leaf submerges and is dragged along the bottom of the river. That's no fun. Gravel and things. Just think about all the vicissitudes of life, and they're just grinding at me. But yet I know the river is flowing. I'm not in control. And if I let go of the control and trust this force of the river, which I'm going to talk about, that I can have peace in the midst of whatever afflictions or difficulties are surrounding me. So think about a hot air balloon. There's a wind blowing, and yet when you're in the balloon is going the exact speed of the wind. So inside the balloon, it feels completely calm. And yet from the outside of the balloon, people looking at it will see the balloon is moving quickly. It's in some sort of turmoil as it's being moved around by the wind. So that's what I would like to present to you as a way to be inside the balloon. And no matter what's going on in our external circumstances, it can't affect how we're seeing life, how we mentally respond to the events that are around us. So that first principle was, if I don't take responsibility for my life, I don't have any power to change it. If I think I need that person to change, if only my partner would be different the way that I think they should be, and not be somebody that I don't like. If they would be different, I could be happy. I don't like my job. I have a horrible boss. The work that I do is not satisfying. If only I had a different job, something that I could enjoy, then I would be able to be happy, or I'd be able to have positive feelings, and on and on and on. All of these life circumstances that we think are causing us to be stressed out is the thing that I focus on. No, it's not those external circumstances. It's how we are perceiving them. So let's go back to when we're born. And if you look at a little baby, that's a brand new baby, is that baby stressing out about, I don't like dinner today or whatever? No, the baby has no concept of information. It has sensory inputs, visual and auditory and touch and taste. And those are either they feel good or they don't. And the baby just reacts to it. And essentially all it wants is nourishment and to maintain a clean, healthy body by, having diaper change or whatever it is. So the baby is not judging life as good or bad. It's just responding to the inputs it gets. And over time, that baby starts to grow up and inputs are coming their way. And it could be a friend or somebody, yelling at them, hey, don't do that. Maybe it's legitimate. They were about to touch a hot stove or something. But all of those experiences cause us to have these mind programs that say, this is not a good situation. I need to do something about it, escape, the fight, the flight, or the freeze response. And instead of that, and then we carry that even today, let's change that mind programming. And by changing our mind programming, we can change the interpretation that we have of the sensory inputs that are coming to us. Therefore, if you want to relieve stress, as I mentioned in my book, it's not about, oh, you got to meditate, eat more healthy, exercise, these various things that will help us to be calm. Those, I would have an analogy and say, let's think of a pressure cooker, and it's on the stove. And the pressure cooker is heating up, heating up, heating up. And when the temperature gets hot enough, there's a little valve that pops and the steam comes out of that pressure cooker. And at that point, the pressure is relieved. So think about meditation, for example. How many gurus and people out there say meditation is a key to peace and serenity and happiness? Well, I meditate. It is pleasurable, but I don't look at that as the solution to my problem, because as soon as I stop meditating, if I were stressed out about something, I had a momentary relief, I'm feeling positive, but now I stop meditating, I get back in my environment, and just the problems all come back again. Meditation, maybe if you do it every day for years and years, like the monks in the East, it might have a permanent effect. But at this moment in time, all that does is temporarily relieve the stress, just like the valve releases the steam pressure. So what I propose is, rather than techniques that release the steam, we need to turn off the burner. Once you turn off the burner, there's no way that steam can build up. So how do we turn off that burner? Let me just bring up 3 principles that I do. And again, they're not something that I take an action on. They're just something that I change the way that I think. So after I accept responsibility, I'm now empowered to say, how do I want to approach life? And the very first thing that I want to do, and it's almost epidemic, is I have to give up being right. Now think about it. Every conflict, every war, every distress, personally, in our families, in the world, there's a conflict means somebody says, I'm right and you're wrong. You need to go with my way. You need to believe the way I'm believing. You need to do what I'm asking you to do. And if you do all those things, everything will be good. But if you don't, I'm going to attempt to impose my belief or my rightness upon you. So there's no way to have that peace and serenity in a permanent way as long as we are in conflict with the world. So how do we let go of the conflict? People say, hey, I can't be wrong, especially in things like politics or religion, these very incendiary areas of beliefs. So how do I be not right without capitulating to someone else and letting them be right and stepping all over me? So here is the secret. Before I impose my rightness or my opinion or the belief that I want you to accept, I'm going to stop first. I'm going to ask you, why do you have the position that you have? I'm going to listen really carefully and see where they're coming from. And I'm here to represent that if we were born where they were born, if we grew up in the circumstances that they grew up, if we grew up in the location that they grew up, if we grew up in the cultural situation that they had or the religious situation that they had, and if we had the same mental capacity that they have, how do we know we wouldn't just be exactly like them? And so by seeing that, we develop some empathy and say, that person is doing the best they can do. That person is doing what they were created to do. Now, if they're doing something harmful, because there are bad guys in the world, and if somebody was doing something that would be harmful to me, that doesn't mean to just lay down and absorb that. Sure, we need to have a boundary. We need to defend ourselves. If you're in an abusive relationship, call the police. You can do something about it because you're taking responsibility for the situation. And you don't need to impose some certain thing that says, I need to change this person. He has to stop abusing me. You can't control other people, but you can control your response. So you get out of there and you find a way to move on and get in a better circumstance. It's not easy because battered women, for example, they're beaten down psychologically, and it's very difficult for them to have the empowerment to make a decision in their life. All I'm saying is that at some point we reach out to those people or they realize I've had enough. That's what I did with my drug addiction. I was harming people. And at some point they were pushing back on me. They were saying, you don't see the problem that you have? I didn't see it. I thought everything was fine. And they finally created a boundary and They said, you know what, you can't be with us anymore unless you're going to clean up your life. And so in the course of doing that, they took the empowerment and they made their life right and pushed me on the outside. And I now had to change if I wanted to be part of that, my family or that group. So giving up being right simply means listening to the other person, understanding where they're coming from, and maybe seeing that from their perspective, it's not unreasonable that they do believe that they're right in that situation. And once you do that, you diffuse all the conflict, and you start to have a discussion that says, I see what you're saying, and I have a different approach to it, and yet I don't think either of our approaches is right or wrong. They are just something different. And again, I'm ignoring that if something's really harmful, like someone's trying to use violence to achieve their goal. Sure, we're not going to see that point of view. But for the most part, for most of us, they're just conflicts of attitude, emotions, feelings, thoughts, and beliefs. They're just not so ingrained or so rigid that they're beyond our ability to change or see another point of view. So the two principles so far are assume responsibility for the results of my life. That empowers me to make a change. And by not imposing my belief system on other people or being rigid that I have to stick with my belief system, I can be open-minded and see another person's point of view. Now, the third principle is, interestingly, one of the most difficult that I find in talking with people for them to adopt. And that is love ourselves first and then others. Now, some of you may be familiar with the saying in the Bible where Jesus says to love your neighbor as yourself. Notice he didn't say just love your neighbor. He said as yourself. In other words, you can't give away love if you don't have it within yourself. And one of the ways I work with people and I test that, I say, hold up a mirror or even just your cell phone and look in that and see your reflection. Can you look at that reflection and say, I love you. You are the most wonderful person. I would not want to be anybody else but you. And it's amazing that sometimes I just randomly meet people and I say, hey, are you willing to do an experiment? And there it is. You'd be surprised that maybe 80% of the people go, not really. They're just like, I'm just not there yet. And especially if I'm coaching people or someone's in therapy or a 12-step program or some other way that they're trying to change their life. I know when I first entered that 12-step program in the hospital, I did not love myself. I loathed myself. I had just been thinking about how I could, end my life. So obviously self-love was so far from anything that I had even contemplated. And yet I was in denial that I didn't like myself. Nobody goes, I suck. Maybe my life sucks, but nobody's really going around saying I'm a horrible person or I don't love myself. We have this denial. And yet when we confront it and we say, you know what, I do have a problem with my self-esteem and my self-love. Then again, we're open, we're empowered to be able to say, what can I do about it? And in my book, I have a little formula that I do. It comes back to the mirror experiment. And you look in the mirror and you just say, I love you. And sometimes I work with people and they go, I just can't say it. I look in the mirror and no, I'm frozen. I say, fine. We don't have to be able to say it right now. Can you think about saying it? Well, no, I can't even think about saying it. Okay. Can you just hold up the phone and look at it? No, I can't even see myself in the reflection. Okay. Can you think about maybe someday you might be able to hold up the phone and you just keep working to some lower and lower goal or some lower and lower activity that you can do until the person says, okay, once a week, I can have my watch have a little alarm. The alarm's going to go off and I'm going to say, oh yeah, I remember, RJ has been working with me and he told me I'm supposed to do that thing. I don't want to do it, but at least I'm thinking about someday maybe doing it. So there's this idea of a willingness. Anything that we want to change about our life, there's a way to change it. The key is to take the first step. And the first step can be just as small a step as is necessary for me to be able to do it. And guess why? This comes from a Stanford professor, B.J. Fogg, and he came up with this Fogg method. It's called, I think, tiny goals, something like that. And he says, if you can just break something down, instead of saying, New Year's resolution, I'm going to exercise 3 times a week and join the gym and I'm going to lose all this weight. And, that's too big of a goal. We all fail our New Year's resolutions. Break something down that I know I can consistently do. Because guess what that does? that builds a concept, a belief that I am a successful person. I've actually succeeded at something. And you may try to put it down and say, well, it wasn't much. Any success in our life, I promise you, begins to change our mindset, begins to have us believe I can achieve something. And once we do even the smallest little thing, we can do a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and we can expand to other things. So my daughter one day was visiting, and she asked me about this, and I said, I really want to exercise, but I just can't get to the gym. It's too hard to drive there and everything. And so I backed off a little bit. And ultimately, I had to back all the way down to just once a week, I'm going to walk out of the house, I'm going to walk down the driveway to the curb, and then I'm going to walk back. And that's my exercise for the day. Well, she's so funny, without me knowing it, she videotaped me walking down it, and she made a meme out of it. And it says, you know, my dad's trying to exercise, and right now his only goal is to walk to the driveway back. And as she's making this meme, it should, you know, the video is showing me walk. And she put it on her Facebook or Instagram, whatever it was, and it got all these, you know, likes and laughs or whatever. But that fact was, she actually was impressed. She actually said, well, you know, Dad, I got to say, I give you credit for no matter what it is, at least you're doing something. So break these things down into the littlest goals, start to succeed at something, even if it's just look in the mirror, right? Even if it's just, I'm going to take 3 steps from the living room to the kitchen or whatever, something that I know I can succeed at. And from there, build on that. And over time, as we succeed at more and more things, guess what? Our self-esteem grows and our self-love will grow. And and again, the principle is love yourself first, then others. Once we actually start to build self-love within us, we don't feel obligated to be of service and to go out and, you know, people are calling us, can you help me do this or that? And we feel obligated. That's not building up our self-esteem in the most part. Sometimes being of service and helping somebody does feel good, but a lot of the time we're doing it out of obligation or pressure or a belief that we have to do it. And that is not working because we haven't loved ourselves enough first. But when we do it, the love starts bursting out of us. We can't help but to reach out and be of service to other people. And it's just as simple as this. Even today, I was walking down the sidewalk over in Encino, California, where I work. And as I walked down, a police officer, very controversial these days, had pulled over. I don't know, maybe they had to put something in their computer. And right as I walked by, the window was down. And I looked in and I said, officers, I realize you guys are in a very difficult situation. There's a lot of conflict going on. I just want you to know that I'm rooting for everything to work out, that you guys can come together in some way, that you can be successful as a police officer. So I wish you well, and I hope you have a good day. You know, the guy looked at me and he's like, what the heck? You know, who's this guy? But they looked at me and they go, you know what? Thank you for that. We do need a little bit of support. Now, that doesn't mean that I believe, you know, that there's not systemic racism in the police force. I actually am a supporter of Black Lives Matter, for example. I don't want to get into that, but just because I don't have to be right that that's the only way, I can be on both sides as far as reaching out with love, empathy, understanding, wisdom, and try to raise the level of understanding and the ability to interact in a positive way and not all these ad hominem attacks and conflicts that we have. We're so polarized in our society today. So that's it for today. I'm just going to talk about first, accept responsibility, then give up being right, and then work on our self-love. And as we do that, these other principles come together. And when something like COVID happens, I lost 80% of my income, but I said, you know what? Something's going to change here. And some other person, they lost their business, and they came to me and said, I have some ideas on, you know, how to turn the business around. It happens to be a car wash of all things. And I came up with a strategy, and I own a car wash now for the last 2 months. I mean, it's crazy. I would have never thought that at the beginning of the year, and I'm 65 years old. And what am I doing getting back into business? But it's just the way my leaf rolled. And it's kind of an exciting, fun time. And I've got a lot of enthusiasm for life, even though things are still tough. So that's my message today. And thank you for letting me be here.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, RJ. That was such a great story. And the car wash, man, it's so, even hearing about that from you in the past always seemed a little random, but it's amazing how things like that just work out, you know, when we trust that it is all going to be okay. You know, you talked about releasing being right. And I think this is such a powerful thing right now, especially because we want to change lives, or we think, we're so caught up in our own like rightness that we think other things are wrong, right? Rather than just a different point of view. So talk about like how do you notice when you are just holding on to being right, and then what do you do? What are some tricks you use to release that?
Okay. The first thing, how do I know? My leaf goes off the river into a waterfall or something, and my life just starts feeling stressful. And just because I wrote a book on living stress free doesn't mean I'm always following these 7 principles. I might can slip out of that, and it's really immediate for me because I start feeling headache or sweating or some sort of physiological response or some sort of mental thing where I go, I feel kind of twisted inside. What the heck happened? And I'll just look at one of those principles and say, you know what? I had an argument with this person that I tried to impose my rightness on them. And of course, given the heated political environment right now, and I don't need to express my personal political viewpoints, but I do know that I meet people and they have a different viewpoint than I do. And if I really think, how can you think that way? Almost everybody, we're so polarized. Everybody thinks, how does the other guy think that way? And then those guys are thinking, how do you think that way? And instead, I just went back and I said, you know what? Let me just hear what you're talking about. And I heard their whole story. I heard their whole philosophy. And then I just said, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And they go, oh, no, I haven't thought about that. I said, maybe that's an area to explore. And in the end, we have a common thread. We're not angry at each other because I took a minute to understand what they were doing. And then was able to suggest some things that maybe they hadn't thought of.
Right. Yeah. And I think, there's two things there. Like when you're suggesting things other people haven't thought of because you have to be right versus suggesting things people haven't thought of because you just honestly want to understand how they think, so that you can gain even greater understanding. I think that's such a powerful thing. And loving yourself first and then others. We had someone on earlier talking about healthy selfishness, which I love that concept, and I'm glad that there's some threads that were really coming together here throughout the day. And I think that for you, where do you kind of draw your own boundaries for what you allow, like how you allow other people to, like if someone is calling on you because they need something or something like that, where do you draw the line in there of when you help and when you don't, and how do you figure that out?
This new car wash venture is teaching me a lot. People come in and the old car wash before it failed was a full service hand wash. You drop your car off and they do the inside and the outside. And people are saying, oh, it's open again. And they're coming in and I go, no, I've changed it to, I put equipment in the tunnel and now you stay in your car and you just drive through. It's the newest thing. You don't have to touch anybody and there's no contact. And, if you want to vacuum, they got the self-help vacuums. Well, lady comes in and she says, I want the full wash. I explain that we don't do that anymore. She goes, I'm telling you, I want this wash. It's impossible. And then she's like super upset and she's, I'm going to sue you or whatever the thing is she's doing. She's really imposing her rightness. I said, I'll tell you what, pull over here and I'll have somebody wash your car for you and they'll take care of it and just pay this normal fee. And she goes, are you kidding me? You're willing to do that? So again, being creative and not having to impose this right. I mean, how could I not be right? It's my business. It only does it a certain way. And yet, by coming up with a solution, he calmed down. And at the end, she says, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to try that tunnel because I really love the customer service. Yeah. So in that sense, I didn't need to have a boundary, but I did not accept her, verbal abuse. And some of the things she was doing, I said, time out for a second and let's see what we can do to resolve the matter. So verbal abuse is something I never accept. Anybody that tries to swear at me or an ad hominem attack, I'll try to diffuse the situation, or otherwise I don't need that person in my life. No. And of course, any kind of physical thing, I'll call the police, if it's something that's serious enough. I'm not willing to take anything that's going to cause me some kind of harm, physical, psychological, spiritual.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. And last thing here, just where can people find out more about you and your work or grab your book? Where can they find out more about that?
So I have a website, randalljohnson.com. And on the website, there's a number of resources, some of which are free. I have a Facebook group that you can join, and people talk about their stressful situations. And what I am committed to is when they go through this program that I've created, they can eliminate guilt, shame, and regret about the past. They can eliminate anxiety, worry, and fear about the future, and they can live a stress-free life in the present moment. And it's free just to join. And as long as you're willing to be vulnerable and talk about your situation, we can come up with strategies. And that Facebook group is Eliminate My Stress, Facebook/. And then randalljohnson.com has, you can enter your email address and get a number of resources that I have there. The book is available on Amazon, or when you go to my website, right at the top of the homepage, you can just click on that. And my contact information is there. If you email me, I return every single email, because more than anything else, I just want to help people. And to have an emotional stability there's probably nothing better in life than that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, RJ. It was such a pleasure chatting with you, and definitely loved your insights. And so we'll talk to you soon. And guys, we'll be back in a few for the next session.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome, guys. Welcome back. I'm here with Srini, the host of the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, where he's interviewed over 1,000 people, including Olympic gold medalists, billionaires, bank robber, various authors and icons, presidential candidates, and even a porn star or two. So definitely going to have some interesting chat here. He's also a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, 3 times, The Art of Being Unmistakable, Unmistakable While Only is Better Than Best, and An Audience of One, Reclaiming Creativity for Its Own Sake. And he even had a little cameo on Netflix's Indian Matchmaking. So, so awesome. We're glad to have him here. And yeah, I guess just start off, you can introduce yourself and then just kind of let us know, like one of the things, I know you're here to talk about creativity in crisis, but would love to hear about how you've dealt with the big crisis in your life and the best way that you found to deal with those things.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that as far as introduction goes, you kind of covered a good amount of it. You know, as you mentioned, I'm the author of multiple books. I host the Unmistakable Creative Podcast and do a bunch of other things. But I think that, when people ask me, what do? I usually just say I use the internet to make things. And some of those things are absolutely stupid, because we live together. So, you've been witness to my insane ideas on a pretty regular basis. And some of them are never going to see the light of day or never meant even for public consumption. But I think that, creativity in crisis is particularly near and dear to my heart because I think my creative career began out of a crisis. I basically finished business school in April 2009, which was a terrible time to get out of any kind of school because you had a combination of this massive recession and another thing where we went from being in an economy that had for decades rewarded people for fitting in to almost overnight being in one that rewarded people for standing out. And so suddenly the sort of track that you follow as an MBA, which is go get your degree, apply to the jobs, and find yourself a nice cushy job making 90 to 100 grand a year as a middle manager, that more or less vanished. It was just no longer an option. And so I found myself, back at my parents' house, living there. I think it was probably 30 years old, and nobody thinks that, hey, I'm going to be living with my parents when I'm 30. You think that's it. When you're 18, you're done, and you're never going back. So needless to say, it was a pretty rough time, and it was, I mean, for everybody, it was a crisis. Now, I looked at it as something that, and I keep in mind, it's easy to say all of this in retrospect. Of course, I wallowed in my misery and complained. I mean, even the day of my graduation from business school, I was like, this is more like my funeral than my graduation. In fact, I think my actual funeral will be a more joyful occasion. But the thing is, it was a rough time. It was really rough to have spent all this time and money getting this degree that you thought would open doors, and instead you basically have, watched the world blow up and your career blow up in your life. So what I had, I think, was the gift of time, which is something that, any crisis pretty much gives us, particularly the one we're in now. And so I realized for the first time in my life, I've got this huge stretch of time. I can either sit here wallowing in my misery, which I did, keep in mind, for about, a week or two, drinking vodka. And needless to say, Indian parents don't have any tolerance for a 30-year-old drunk at their house. So that was the end of that. And so basically I borrowed $500 from my dad to enroll in an online course about starting a blog. And I poured all of my energy into that. And that sort of was the foundation for where I've ended up today. And the funny thing is that I didn't start the blog to build a business. I had no intention of necessarily building, what I have. Somebody asked me the other day, they're like, what is it that made you think that you had something so important to say that you were worth listening to? I said, I didn't think I had anything important to say that was worth listening to. I just had this desire to express my creativity, and my sort of natural tendency, as you know from, living together, is when I see new technology, it's like, oh, what could I make using this? And so that's really kind of defined my career. And, as a byproduct, needless to say, that ship of, starting that first blog, which I only started to help me stand on the job market, really sailed off course and led to, the Untitled Creative Podcast, writing books, and all sorts of things that I could not have planned for. One of my favorite Seth Godin quotes is like, the best way to be where you want to be a year from now or 10 years from now is to do something today that you'll be glad that you did. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of like planting seeds. You just don't know when they're going to bear fruit. But the thing is that it takes time for any seed to bear fruit. If you're even thinking about planting things in a garden, right? It takes, what, 6-7 weeks? Well, you can't, get to 7 weeks from now and think, oh, why don't I have any fruits? It's because of what you did 7 weeks ago that you actually will get the fruit. And so that's kind of the way that I think about this. That's kind of a jump off point.
Nice. Yeah, kind of makes you wonder if it steered you off course or on course. It's like we never know.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. I think that one of the things that happens is that crisis, in a lot of ways, is a reckoning of sorts. It's a moment to kind of look at your life and say, okay, how comfortable have I been, and how much of where I'm at right now is out of the genuine desire to do what I want to do, or out of my desire for comfort. And human beings by nature just can't stand discomfort. Susan David, who's an emotional researcher and psychologist, actually says that discomfort is the price of admission for a meaningful life. And everything you do when you've never done it before is comfortable. Crisis in particular is incredibly uncomfortable in numerous ways. But yeah, I think to your point, we can see it as a disaster, or we can see it as an opportunity. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to downplay the severity of crisis. People are really suffering, and I think it would be irresponsible for them to be like, oh, I just be creative and forget about the fact that you have bills to pay and all this kind of stuff. So I just want to put that out there.
Cool. Yeah, that makes total sense. So you talked about how these big crises has really helped define you, and they're a great time to kind of take a step back and sort of reevaluate. How do you think you've reevaluated during the past 4 or 5 months now that we've been in this crisis?
Well, I think that the thing that I saw, keep in mind, one of my biggest sort of income streams was vanished because I was a public speaker. That was a huge part of it. And I think that what it did was it gave me an opportunity to say, okay, look, what parts of my life and my business are highly dependent on variables that are out of my control, and which ones are in my control. And that, really kind of fueled basically focusing on all the things we can control. So we built, an online membership site where we help people make their ideas happen. And what started out as sort of just a way to build community and to try to spread the word about Untitled Creative evolved. And I think when we started this thing back in October, we first monetized in December. We opened it up to 11 people. We're making about $100 a month on the site, and now it generates $1,100 to $1,200 a month in recurring revenue because of the fact that we were able to shift our energy to the thing that we can control. And I think that I think if you look at crisis, right, it happens in sort of 5 or so stages, which is kind of like the 5 stages of grief, right? So you have panic, you have projection, you have acceptance. Then, from acceptance, you get awareness, and from there you get action. But a lot of people get stuck in those first 2 phases of panic and projections. You panic about something, and then you make it mean all of these things, and you basically, predict the future. And because of the way that you're thinking about the future, you more or less bring about the worst version of the future because all of your actions are fueled by that. Now, one of the things that we as humans have a unique capacity for is this ability to pause between stimulus and response. And I think that that's a big thing to kind of say, okay, let me not panic, or let me not act on panic. And, because what happens is that if you panic, you don't take that pause, in projection, your actions actually become the very thing that basically brings about the worst case scenario that you were projecting. So I think it's important to really kind of take time. And to me, unplugging is a very critical part of this. We live and that's really hard right now in a 24-hour news cycle where, you're just being bombarded with not just news, but everywhere. And the thing is, our primary connection to the world happens to be the internet at the moment.
Right.
And yet, I still think that you need windows of solitude, time away from sort of work. We don't play nearly enough. I think this is a really important part of the creative process. As you know, we torture you with our endless games of NBA 2K21, other roommate and But the truth is that I find that to be an invaluable part of the day. It's actually incredibly important because it actually, re-energizes me. Even when I lose, I mean, I get mad when I lose, but still it's fun. And I think that that's one of those things that we kind of lose sight of, is that this is supposed to be fun. Even in the creative process, there's a point at which you start to make this shift where it does start to become about the joy of the work, and something really interesting happens. All the external results start to come after that. But yeah, I mean, I think that really what this is about is it's largely a process of self-discovery and self-awareness to figure this out. So Justine Musk, who's a friend of ours and then the former guest on Unmistakable Creative, who happens to be Elon Musk's ex-wife, one of the things she said is that crisis shatters all of the structures in our lives. And it could be an identity crisis, it could be an economic crisis, it could be personal crisis, whatever it is. We have heartbreak, we have all these things that we have to basically deal with. But when those structures get shattered, we can either try to rebuild them as they were, or we can build something that's new and 1,000 times better. So you go back to the example of me not having a job post-business school. Now, I had a lot of classmates who sat around, lamenting the fact they didn't have a job, and then many of them did what I think was the height of stupidity. There was one girl who literally applied to every job on the internet. And was like, why would you do that? It's just a bad use of your time. But I think there was a delusion that, I'm going to rebuild the structure that was once in place, not even thinking about the fact, well, that structure is never coming back. Anybody who saw that crisis knows that it wasn't like all the jobs that were lost during that crisis came back. What we realized in that moment was 90% of those jobs were irrelevant. We didn't need them. And so that, requires reimagining what the structures of your life are going to be when you rebuild. And so I think that's critically important to understand if you really want to make good use of the crisis, because there's no point getting back to the status quo after a crisis, because the status quo was what put you in that crisis in the first place.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting because I think right now, you talked about how things are changing and things that have gotten eliminated. And I mean, you're seeing a massive increase in, virtual events like this one, people connecting on, over the internet. How do you think we can utilize the tools that we have today to increase connection and creativity without detracting from it, especially in a time like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that, this is something to think about, right? The funny thing is, it doesn't matter what a tool is. There are a number of different uses for any tool. You can use a hammer to build a shelf, or you can use a hammer to hit somebody over the head and kill them. So it's really thinking about this in a very deliberate and mindful way in terms of how we utilize the technology that is at our disposal. So I think that, if you look at it, you can use a tool like Facebook to mildly entertain yourself, or even Twitter, whatever it is, and watch the hours go by as you scroll through Instagram and read through your newsfeed or whatever it is. But the funny thing is, you can use those same tools to share creative work, to do creative work. So I think that the first thing that it comes down to is a very mindful and deliberate approach to how you use technology. And I'm saying this as somebody who's the ultimate junkie when it comes to exploring new tools, to the point where I drive people around crazy. But I think that Cal Newport had a really great way of looking at this in his book Deep Work, where you take a craftsman approach to tool selection. You're kind of saying, okay, well, here's my goal. Does this tool support the goal? So as you know, I'm hardly ever on Facebook. I just happened to be during this brief window where this Indian matchmaking thing came out, only because I wanted to connect with old friends. But the thing that you have to look at and say is, okay, let's say, for example, your goal is to write, 3 really in-depth pieces. Does the tool actually support the goal? If this is, what is the tool? What's the goal? What are the highest value activities that lead to the goal? So let's say just use writing as an example, or as a blogger for me. For me, it's okay, I want to do 3 or 4 really in-depth pieces that go deep into a topic. Now, does Facebook necessarily support that goal? Maybe not as much as you would think. So I can live without it. Whereas something like Notion, which is kind of my go-to for everything, is essential. That is something that I actually can't live without, because it actually elevates my ability to do my work.
Yeah.
I think that when you look at tools, so like I said, my default question always is, what can I make using this? And the funny thing is that you have tools at your fingertips that are easier to use than they've ever been. The ability to go from idea to execution is something that we've never seen at such a pace. Now, I'm saying that with one caveat. Just because you can go from idea to execution at such a rapid pace, you're also not going to experience success with that idea as quickly. That still takes all of those things that nobody wants to do, which is the 10,000 hours of mastery, because you're trying to stand out in a sea of noise, and at the end of the day, what stands out in a sea of noise and what rises to the top is stuff that's of high quality. To sum it up, you can't hide shitty art behind great marketing. It's just not possible. Even if you manage to get some degree of success with that, eventually it'll be revealed for what it is. So that's the ugly part. But there's one other question I think is incredibly valuable for people to ask when you think about sort of fueling creativity. And I can't take credit for this, but Julian Smith, who's the founder of a startup called Breather, which is an Airbnb for office space, now is an investor, written a couple of New York Times bestselling books, also had probably what was one of the most popular blogs on the internet when he was an active blogger. One of the things he said to me that's always stayed with me that has driven a lot of my approach to this is when he sees something happen in the market, he's, what does this make possible that wasn't before? And the thing that happens is every 3 to 5, sometimes 7 years, and that cycle is getting shorter and shorter, you have these fundamental paradigm shifts that change what's possible with technology. So for Julian, he gave me this example of, okay, in 2008, Apple comes out with the iPhone. Shortly after that, you get location tracking as a part of the iPhone. And suddenly, billions of dollars in innovation that weren't possible before become possible. I mean, many of the startups we take for granted, DoorDash, Airbnb, Uber, all that stuff was born out of the intersection of those three technologies. And if you go back to, say, the late 90s, when e-commerce first came about, the adult film industry figured out how to take our credit cards over the internet and charge a payment. Mark Andreessen created the web browser. So you get the combination of a commercial web browser plus the ability to transact, and suddenly e-commerce as we know it is born.
Right.
And fast forward to today, you're basically seeing the intersection of all of these technologies at once, which is making unparalleled amounts of creativity and innovation possible at a level that we've never been able to do. Somebody like me who doesn't know a damn thing about writing code and finds computer science just to be overwhelming and difficult, I can build apps. Like, they're literally no-code app building tools that you see rolling through Product Hunt every single day. Thanks to artificial intelligence, the things that we can do now are things that would have taken hours take minutes. And just to give you an example, our other roommate Matt wanted me to film a trailer for him, a speaking trailer. Now keep in mind, I'm not a video expert or a videographer. I understood how to tell stories, but just by using the software that's available, what would normally take thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours, we could do in a matter of a day or two, and really make it surprisingly good with very little effort. And I think that that's the thing we don't understand. So, as far as making sure it doesn't become detrimental to our efforts, that's a whole other landmine in which we really have to kind of think about ethics, like the way we control or consume information. And I think part of this is about being deliberate about what you consume in a lot of ways, because the danger, particularly in the ecosystems that people like you and I live in, is that we end up in an echo chamber where we're seeing the same types of things, reading the same types of books, and basically falling victim to our own cognitive biases that confirm everything we already believe. So I think it's important to seek out viewpoints that you disagree with, to expose yourself to a wide variety of people, ideas, information, because otherwise you end up with a situation similar to the one we're in now, which is just we're divided, we're polarized, and you can't get out of a situation that's polarized unless you're willing to have meaningful dialogue with people that you don't agree with.
Right.
Well, you and I don't agree on a lot of things, but we live together.
Right.
And if we weren't willing to do that, we'd be at each other's throats. It would never work. And I think that that's fundamentally important. The other final piece of this that I think I'll layer on top of this in terms of the communication piece and connection piece is that one of the problems with the way that we use technology is that we tend not to recognize that just because somebody is, behind an avatar, behind an Instagram feed, whatever it is, that doesn't change the fact that they're a human being. And I think for me it was just based on the recent Netflix experience where, at the end of the day, I came out looking pretty good, and the other person whose name we won't mention came out looking worse. But I made a deliberate point never to engage in any way, shape, way, or form to say anything bad. Because I saw what was happening. It was so bad that I was like, why am I going to contribute to somebody else's suffering? Yeah, they might have said something awful about me or wrong about me or done wrong by me in some way, but what do you gain from that? And I remember just recently I published this article on 10 lessons from Hindu mythology that can guide us today. And one of them was about choosing your words. It's easier than ever to troll, celebrities on social media, criticize people you've never met, and judge people's lives or their choices based on the perception that's created via the avatar that they show to the world. And it's a wildly inaccurate avatar. So I think that those are sort of layers. So there's, sort of the tactical layers, but I think there's also the human layer. We have to remember that behind all of this are human beings, regardless of, who they are, or how they come across. Really, this is the way I say it. You can use the internet as a platform for inspiration or outrage. What do you think is going to lead you to a better life?
Right. Yeah, you talked about sort of, how people see you online. I think it's an interesting concept that I wanted to ask you about, even like with your brand Unmistakable, the word unmistakable and almost everything you do, and looking at people that stand out. It seems like there's, I noticed from speaking to you, there's a big difference between sort of how you define yourself and how, versus letting others define you. Right. So what would you say is like the way that people can show up to these kinds of conversations, with that knowledge, with like, I'm trying to reach out and have a breadth of experiences, but I'm me in that.
Yeah. So one of the things we have to understand is that, when you're in the public eye, media is this incredibly powerful tool to shape perception. And any public figure is hyper aware of that. And you have to be if you're going to be a public figure of any kind. We like this idea of, complete authenticity, but that's not feasible. I say things to you that I would never in a million years say in a public setting. The three of us together, you and my roommate do, all of us would basically be in lawsuits and PR crises pretty much all week long, from the way we start our days to the way we end them. And the thing is that, and it's not that we're horrible people, but the thing is that people have to understand that being authentic and being yourself when you're in a public position of any kind, or a public figure of any kind, doesn't mean you just shoot from the hip. You have to be mindful of the fact that every single thing that you do, say, tweet, Facebook, whatever it is always shaping the perception of who you are. That's just how media works. You can say one thing. Now, I'll give you an example without the specifics, but I was on a podcast once, and I was with my friend Elizabeth D'Alto. She asked me some question, and I answered it, and I didn't really think about the answer. And when I was talking to my business partner and a content strategist, they're like, "We know you well enough to know that there's no way it came across that polished." They're like, "You have the recording of this, right?" And we're like, "Yes." They're like, "Play it." They're like, "Yeah, this is a crisis in the making. This sounds sexist, misogynistic, and I'm anything but those things, but just one sentence." So I had to actually go back to her and say, "Look, I cannot have you air this because your audience overlaps with mine. It comes across really awful." And the thing is that you got to remember also, in the public eye, you're not just representing yourself. Everything you say and do is also a representation of every single person who is associated with you or who has invested in you in any capacity, whether it's your audience, whether it's your community. Then in my case, it's editors, speaking agents, investors, a whole group of people. So I think that there's actually a really fascinating book by a guy named Stephen Goldstein called The Turn On, which is, he said, how powerful people from Washington to Wall Street to Hollywood make us like them. And I'm actually going to be interviewing him soon. But I think that book really is probably the best explanation I have ever found about the psychological component of what it means to be a public figure and build an audience for yourself.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah, I know, we've talked about both, sort of our external environment, whether it's related to media or like the crisis that we're facing. How do you kind of regulate your internal environment to show up how you do, with the big audience, with, all of the crises going on right now that all have their own little flashpoints? What does that look like for you internally?
Yeah, the funny thing is, I think so much of the funny thing is there's maybe no area of life, where unlike environments where external problems can solve internal problems. Now, what I'm not saying is, go out and buy a bunch of shit you don't need and make yourself feel better. But environment has a profound influence on human behavior, emotions, and everything else, right? And I'm not talking about, like I said, mansions and Ferraris, but we had this guy, Jim Bunch, who talked about this concept of the 9 environments that make up your life. And you have a video on our website. You can find it on YouTube. If you just do 9 environments, Jim Bunch, Unmistakable, you'll find it as an animation. But the idea is that everything in your life is an environment, and they're inextricably linked, from everything you eat to what you wear, to the people you surround yourself with, to the content you consume. And that is one of the few places where we have the power to choose external inputs that actually influence our internal well-being. So, I'm fortunate in that I live with you and Matt. That takes care of my social environment, so that if anything else bad happens, it kind of serves as a buffer. Now, in a crisis or a pandemic, that's probably really hard for a lot of people, especially people who live alone. But it's amazing how small aesthetic changes to your environment can make a huge difference. So, if you look at my office, there's a reason I have, frame prints of the people I've interviewed on my wall, because it inspires me. I'll give you another tactical example from my book and an experience that I had. So, end of 2014, I was in a really bad place. My business was kind of on life support. I had a really rough year, and I was back at my parents' house, not thinking I would be. And I remember looking at the bookshelf, and I was like, okay, I want to clear this bookshelf of anything that no longer inspires me. It's almost like taking a Marie Kondo approach to your bookshelf. And there's a reason the book is called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, because there's something very magical about eliminating things that no longer represent who you are, what you want, because what you do is you create space for who you want to become. And so I would say, don't design an environment for who you are, but design an environment that's conducive to the person you become. So I got rid of every book I ever owned about social media marketing. I don't care about any of this stuff. And the top shelf was basically nothing but books published by Penguin. It was just a strange coincidence. 2 weeks later, I got an email from an editor at Penguin asking if I wanted to write with them. And so after that, I was sold. I was always like, okay, environment matters. And, like I said, it from clutter to every little thing. But ultimately, really the litmus test is very simple. When you go into any environment, whether that's, the media you consume, or being on, a summit like this, or the people that you surround yourself with, even the clothes that you wear, this is actually a really simple one, because right now, you of all people know, because you saw how I dressed for the entire first month we lived together, I basically looked like a homeless person because I wore this flannel from Costco every day. And that flannel is awesome and warm, by the way. You should all get one. But that being said, there's something that happens when we're working from home. You don't have to actually get ready or do anything. And just for anybody who's a woman, this. Think about how you feel about yourself and how you carry yourself when you put on a really, really nice dress to go to like a black tie event. You carry yourself differently. You think about yourself differently. And so even the simple act of getting ready for work can fundamentally change how you feel throughout the day. So, I think those are small sort of physical tweaks that help manage your internal environment. Now, obviously, there are all the other things that I'm not really the expert in, like meditation, exercise, but I think that if you look at it all as a sort of interdependent system, that all impacts each other, everything is related. So, the people that you're with will influence how you feel about yourself. The clothes that you wear will influence how you carry yourself. All of that ties together. And all of that basically is really kind of, for me, been the foundation of managing sort of, the emotional ups and downs. And it's not that I'm immune to ever being down or depressed.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, well, I really appreciate the time here, and we're about to have to wrap up here. But before we do, just can you, where can people find out more about you? Where can you connect with?
You can find the Unmistakable Creative Podcast anywhere podcasts are available. Amazon now has podcasts, apparently. I don't know if ours is there yet, but Spotify, iTunes, or whatever podcast app you listen to. And then unmistakablecreative.com is where you can find out more about what we do. And then all my books are on Amazon.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for stuff. It's great insight, and such a powerful new piece of this conversation that we're having throughout the summit. So I really appreciate you.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. guys, welcome back. We're gonna be going through another interview segment here, this time with Jesse Baltes. And he's also been a stand-up comic, so it's totally random. We have two stand-up comics on here today, and actually, I think I remember hearing that you guys performed together in DC for a while, like a decade ago, which is it's just amazing how things cross like that. Yeah. Anyway, Jesse founded the Mad Hatter Showcase in DC. Worked on the Bargain Basement show in Chicago, and today's topic is about finding meaning in mortality. And his father was recently diagnosed with ALS, and he's been launching this initiative called ALS Car Go to help raise awareness. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. He's also been an integral part of the Global Hope Summit team. So he's the guy that made most of the memes for us. And, or as he says, if you like him, he did them. If you don't, it was my fault. So
yeah, I'll blame Tim on those then.
But awesome, man. So yeah, just first of all, just tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about this project you're working on.
Yeah, my name's Jesse. I am in the Eastern U.S. right now. I am at the very, very, very beginning of this initiative, as you said. In fact, I'm coming live at you from inside a van, which is going to be my home for the foreseeable future. I mean, at least the next 4 or 5 months, I think. Yeah, as you said, my dad was recently diagnosed with ALS, which is, of course, a degenerative neurological disease, which essentially means that he will only get worse from here. He's having a little muscle loss in his right hand right now, his right arm. But yeah, this project has kind of got multiple prongs. Stage one is that I'm going to be building this van out with my dad, which is why I'm currently headed to Minnesota, where he and my mom live. So right now this van it's a mattress and it's my bike and a few boxes, and that's about it. So we're gonna build this whole thing out together, the two of us. We'll put in a bed, we'll put in a kitchenette with a fridge and sink and all that, and maybe a toilet. I don't know. Stay tuned. We'll see.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what is it that inspired you to go this route, to decide to do the van?
It was kind of the culmination of several different conversations with different friends about what's going on in the world today, COVID in the U.S., what options are still available to us, and a couple of good friends of mine were encouraging me to do this, right? Just get in a van and go. And it kind of dovetailed with my dad's situation in that, this is also a new diagnosis, and it seemed like a nice way to sort of spend time with him, work on a project with him, but also to, get out on my own a little bit, do some sort of introspection, and hopefully raise a little awareness along the way about ALS, about the research that's being done, about the treatments that are available, which frankly are extremely limited. And yeah, just kind of mush all that into one. And I think probably the big, I'll be keeping track of it on social media, Instagram and all that. But I think the big sort of product of it is going to be a podcast that'll likely just be one season, but kind of discussing with him what his experience is with this situation, with ALS, with knowing that there really is not a cure, there are only a few treatments, and kind of what it is to know that a parent is going to die and how you process that, and I'd like to speak to some other people as well, about friends of mine, about their relationships with their mostly fathers, but parents, and kind of what those look like and what are the complications. And I know a few folks who have either lost parents or have had close calls, and it's definitely not a new subject by any stretch, but I do think that we generally try to avoid thinking about this kind of thing as long as humanly possible, So unless a loved one is dying or has died, I feel like it's not really in our nature to go down that mental rabbit hole of what is that experience going to be? How do you prepare? How do you get to the other side of it, essentially?
Yeah, I think currently in this time, I think there's a lot of people experiencing or admitting their own mortality, just with the virus. I think that's something big that people are going through right now. But I'm curious, how did you feel like when you first heard about your dad's ALS, and like how have you went about coming to grips with it for yourself?
I mean, the way I found out was so unremarkable. I was staying with some good friends in Boston, where I was writing out a lot of this sort of COVID situation, and it was just a text message from my mom to all the siblings, just, I don't want to say nonchalantly, but kind of fucking nonchalantly, like, Dad was diagnosed with ALS. And I was like,
what?
Is this a typo? Like, this is how you're going to tell us? And the friends who I was staying with, one of them is a doctor, and I have a vague passing awareness of ALS, of Lou Gehrig's disease. And I know it's not good, but the first thing I did was kind of shell shocked. I asked him, what does this mean? What does this diagnosis mean? How bad is it? What's the prognosis? And, of course, he obviously doesn't know my dad's particular situation, but, the prognosis is not good. It is going to get worse, and there's potentially ways to slow the progression, but there's no stopping it. There's no reversing it. So
yeah,
it's sort of set in kind of slowly that oh, okay, this is like a very tangible way that this could go. And I mean, as far as processing it, I haven't. I've made a very conscious choice to not deal with this yet. I figure buy a van, drive across the country first, and then maybe actually try to comprehend what this means, and what the experience is going to be for him and for our family and for me personally, to sort of just move forward as best we can.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We've had a few people today talking about sort of this intersection of kind of what life throws at us, what our own sort of genius and skills and everything else is, and kind of how that can all come together in unique ways. And I definitely think this is a unique way, which is great. And I think that's so important that we lean into those moments. But I guess, how is your relationship to your dad, not necessarily as a father, but just as another human being? How has your thinking about him shifted since just realizing that he is going to die?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think, I mean, I only kind of came to grips with my dad and my mom being fully developed human beings prior to my birth, a decade ago. That's when I was oh, you were a person. You had a life and interests other than just feeding me and cleaning up my poop or whatever.
Right.
So that's already kind of a that was already, and I honestly don't know. I think a lot of people kind of have that aha moment that oh, my parents are people, but also maybe everyone knows that and I was just behind the curve. I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, as far as my relationship with my dad, just as a person, I mean, of course it's difficult to disconnect the paternal dynamic, but
Fair enough.
it's good. It's good. I have some friends who had complicated relationships with their parents, or just bad relationships with their parents. And my relationship with my folks in my, both my mom and my dad is great. They've always been super supportive of me. They've, always, I know, wanted the best for me, even when, those paths were not necessarily the most orthodox or, expected ways to go. And yeah, I mean, he's always there for me. We don't talk a ton. Like, the dynamic in my family, which I think is not uncommon, is kind of that I talk to my mom and she's sort of the conduit. And if there's something I need to talk directly with my dad about, like I was working on this motorcycle during COVID, and I'd call him directly about how do I paint on chrome, or how do I wire this this headlamp, because he was an electrician in the Navy many lifetimes ago. So yeah, there it is kind of like I don't know, sort of a Spartan communication. Like, we talk when there's something to talk about.
Yeah.
Whereas my mom she just wants to talk. She, no agenda, no path, no objective, just let's talk.
Right.
So yeah, but it's the relationship is good, but there is that, like, one thought that I've been having over and over again is like that I need to cram more relationship into the time that we have left. Like, I need to ask the big questions and hear the, his like lifelong lessons, but I also feel like that instinct is very much based on, TVs and film, where there's going to be some dramatic, he's in a hospital bed and he whispers to me like the secret of life or whatever, Of course I know intellectually that's not real. That's not how it's going to go. But there is that knee jerk, like, I need to think of all the questions before it's too late, kind of like a sort of a FOMO aspect to it all.
Do you think that's the result of like regret of not having done that enough in the past, or do you think that's just kind of like, oh, I only have so much time left?
I think it's probably a little of both. I don't. It's not as though like we're estranged or anything like that, but like I was saying, I mostly talk to my mom when I'm keeping in touch with my parents, and so there is a little of that, like, maybe I should have been asking these questions earlier, kind of piece of it, but yeah, I think it's mostly I think it's mostly just seeing the writing on the wall a little bit and knowing that there is finite time. And I think that's the bigger catalyst for like, what do I want to know, before.
Cool. Yeah, I had a very good, a mentor of mine recently, was actually speaking later on the summit, but, he kind of asked me, he's like, told me one time that I hadn't come to grips with my own mortality, right, and what that meant for my life. So I'm curious, like, is there anything that's being brought up here where you're kind of seeing your own mortality more in this relationship or in this situation?
Yeah. Yeah, I think yes. I think like it's kind of early in the process of, accepting all this and learning about all this and understanding it. So I think that piece is probably going to continue to hit harder over the coming like weeks and months.
Right.
But there definitely is, a sense of your own mortality. Like, I think about, I know my dad's parents did not live very long. He is, oh God, this is terrible. 87, just turned 87. Man, I hope that's right. But his folks both passed away much younger, in their 50s. And so I've had conversations with him before where, he's sort of indicated that he kind of feels like he already beat the odds. Like he's had health issues his whole life, or at least my whole life. He's dealt with arthritis, and he's dealt with diabetes, and so there have always been different issues. So have been times where it seems like he feels, and I've never asked him this directly, but that he sort of beat the odds. He's like a little bit on borrowed time. Like he already did better than expected in terms of longevity.
Right.
And I do like it does kind of trickle down because there is that father-son bond, and there is the fact that like my father and I happen to just look a lot alike. There are pictures of him when he was younger and of me when I was that age, and like we look like practically the same person. And so there is something about seeing someone who looks like me, who is gonna go through this experience that I think does drive the mortality point home. But again, like I've really not allowed myself to totally unpack that piece yet.
Right. We earlier today we saw a few different things related to kind of finding your own, whether that's your passion, your ambition, your like what you're trying to create in the world, coming at that from a few different angles. And I realize that you're unpacking this for yourself, so I'm going to ask this a little more generally. How do you think understanding your own mortality relates to the your own pursuance of your mission or your purpose?
That's been a big shift, or a continuation of a big shift, which is absolutely that, reckoning with one's own mortality and therefore your limited time on this planet. Like, absolutely, it ramps up the motivation, because it's easy, especially when you're younger, to kind of, and I'm probably more guilty of this than most people. You're able to just sort of kind of drift from thing to thing and flit around, and like, feel like you don't have to commit. You've got time to figure it out. And I've been feeling, in the last several years, that the clock is very much ticking on, just for me personally, just like finding some path and some sense of sort of stability and consistency, just because after college, I was, doing stand-up for 15 years, and I had every odd job under the sun during that time. And I've continued to kind of just do things piecemeal, and my folks have been so supportive. And I know, especially my mom would love to see me comfortable, like financially, like stable. And I think my dad doesn't say it, but I'm sure he feels that way as well. And there is maybe even a little more added urgency that, like, gosh, wouldn't it be nice to have my fucking shit together before my dad dies? Like, that would be nice. It would be nice if he didn't, shuffle off this mortal coil thinking, man, that kid really didn't do shit. Like, he had a lot of time and he did not do anything. So, I think definitely seeing his path laid out and realizing I'm getting closer to the end than the beginning, does absolutely kind of light a fire. Yeah. Awesome.
Shift gears a little bit here, because I want to talk more about, we'll talk a little less about the mortality and more about the relationship side, I think. I know you said a lot, like you've always kind of connected through your parents, through your mom, and I think that's probably a fairly common occurrence in a lot of places, although I'm sure it's not always the case. But I'm curious, what kind of impact do you feel like the relationship with your dad has made on your life, and how do you hope to deepen that relationship in the next however long is left.
I mean, as far as impact, I think, it's easily one of the most important relationships in my life. And, he's one of the most important role models in my life, and that he grew up in like a very small town in northern Minnesota, like pretty parochial. And he, got out and kind of built a great life for himself, not without its ups and downs, certainly, but, yeah, he, was a very smart guy. He got a great education. He was able to wear a ton of different hats in his professional career. And I think he did it all in a very respectable way, I guess, like a value driven way, in that he, how he treats people and how he moves through the world are ways that I respect and appreciate, and try to mimic in my life. Yeah, I think, and of course from my mom too, but I think their values, really steer me. And I suppose that's probably true for most people, but maybe if you have, shitty parents, you end up trying to go the opposite direction. But yeah, but but the flip side of that coin is that in a lot of ways he's kind of theoretical also. Like when we were growing up, he was around, he was home every night, but he wasn't, I don't remember him being like super involved before a certain age. Like in my memory, there was a time when us kids learned how to make jokes, and I feel like that's when he was like, all right, I guess you're cool. I guess I can hang out with you. But I feel like he was a little more removed before that. But yeah, as far as like where I would like the relationship to go, again, I don't know. I have this sort of corny idea that like all the the boundaries and the limitations of the relationship kind of fade, and it's like shit or get off the pot time, and we can maybe have, I don't know, some really real conversations about death. And he has a complicated relationship with religion, and how that kind of plays into it. And and kind of what other lessons does he have for me, just like how to continue moving through this world after he's gone.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think in so many cases there's the legacy, the thing we want to that even we want to leave behind, right, is so important and so desired. And I think at the same time, through our own human connection, you want other people's legacies to happen too,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's really, that's really powerful. Yeah. So what, so right now you're on your way to Minnesota to do the van. You have any like special, like what's the thing you really want in the van besides the toilet?
Man, there's no besides, Tim. In my perfect world, I get they have incinerating toilets. They're like $2,000, but it burns it all up. That's it. It's done. So that would be pretty nice. But other than that, I think I would just like a comfortable place to sit and write. I'd like to really kind of get a lot of this on paper while I'm cruising around the country. And so, yeah, just a comfortable place to sit and write in this van would be super sweet.
Yeah, and I know from you before, like, I mean, yeah, you traveled a lot doing stand-up, but one of the things and one of the reasons you kind of left Minnesota in the first place, if I can be so bold, is that you wanted to explore, right? You wanted to see different cultures. And I, so it's got to be interesting, having that exploration and then now going home. What does that feel like, and how do you think that sort of relates to why you want to go on this trip and why you want to continue to explore?
Um, yeah, I will say going home feels a little bizarre in this situation.
Mm.
First of all, I'm driving obviously because I have this van, but also because you know, but both my parents are older. My dad is now immunocompromised, and so it just didn't feel safe or reasonable to fly or get home on any kind of public transit.
Right.
But I will confess I do have sort of a dread of like getting stuck in Minnesota. And let me be clear, I grew up in the Twin Cities. I grew up outside of St. Paul. I loved my formative years. I loved growing up there, but for whatever reason, like settling back there really bums me out. And I weirdly I just had my 20th high school reunion via Zoom a couple weeks ago, and everyone was doing great. Like everyone looked great. They had kids, they had careers, but a lot of them had settled down like within probably 15-20 mile radius of where we all went to high school. And and there's no judgment in that. Like if that's what you're looking for, I totally respect it. It's not what I want. And of my siblings, I have two sisters and a brother, and my sister Jenny, who lives in the Twin Cities still, and myself are the ones who are the most unfettered, right? Like we don't have, we don't have families, and we can be there. But I do get concerned that like I maybe go back for a longer period of time to help out, and then I don't make it back out, and that does kind of bum me out a little bit. And I do think that is part of the get on the road thing. Is like, this is a great project and I'm really going to get to spend some good time with my dad, but there's also like there's an out where I get to go, like you said, explore. And I'm probably going to spend a month or two in the Southwest, which I've never done. And just kind of keep doing what I want to be doing with my life, and maybe that's a continuation of this greater urgency, seeing that there is an end to like, okay, let me get on the road now. Let me do this thing now. And in a lot of ways honor my dad by having an experience that he maybe won't be able to have again. And that's both the traveling, but he can travel. I mean, he's not in terrible shape by any stretch, but
Right.
but also like I'd like to get a lot of running in and a lot of biking in and like just a lot of time in nature. And he loves that. My mom loves that. They go to northern Minnesota, the Boundary Waters, a bunch of times every summer. But it feels like a way to honor him and honor the experience he's going to be having, to kind of get out and soak it all up.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. How do you think hope plays in? And we've had a little bit of a darker conversation here, just kind of. Not even darker, that's the wrong word. Just deeper, and I want to say, like, how does hope play a role, in your project and what you're doing, like with your dad? Where do you feel like where that's leading you?
I think that there's sort of an overlap between the impetus to do more with less time and what we're calling hope, right? And by that I mean all these experiences that we're going to have are kind of positive outcomes from this frankly very shitty diagnosis.
Right.
There's being diagnosed with a degenerative disease it's not fucking good, period. But if what's coming out of this is I do get to spend some really good time with my dad when he still is all there, and selfishly I do get to travel the country and hopefully doing this to kind of raise awareness and maybe some money for ALS is again kind of a way to honor my dad. And he's sort of a stoic German and doesn't really talk much about emotions, and me, I'm very enlightened, but with him there's not a lot of like I love you your nice kind of conversations. Even though I know we both know that it's there, of course.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's the hope is that there are good things that are going to come from this knowledge, as opposed to if he just passed away suddenly, where there wouldn't be this time to process and there wouldn't be this time to do a project together and to like maybe have some good conversations. And so yeah, I think that's what I feel hopeful about, is that this can allow us to really say anything we want to say, and experience what we want to before we don't get to.
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate you coming on here and for bearing your soul, for what you're doing. And I think it's a really amazing project. And I definitely can see the great deepening of that connection with your dad coming from this. And I think that's such a great and powerful goal. So, just tell everybody where they can find out more, how they can follow you on your journey.
Yeah, there on the screen there's my website, jessebaltes.com, and on the website I have links to all my social media. I'm most active on Instagram, but yeah, I'm gonna kind of be sharing this via those platforms. There'll be an Instagram component, and there'll also be this links to this podcast that'll be conversations about this with my dad, with my friends, about their parents and their relationships. So jessebaltes.com is sort of the best way to launch from. Best place.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thank you for coming on here again, and also just deeply appreciate all that you've done to support us getting Global Hope Summit out and onto the airwaves. So
my pleasure, man. Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to following you on this trip as well. So with that, we'll wrap this session here, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, Tim.
Hey guys, excited to have Brandon Turner on with us now, and he's going to be talking about whether we're divided or dividing each other, which is just, I believe, going to be an incredible talk. He's an IT guy turned entrepreneur. His main gig is giving time back to people, owners, managers, and teams. And as a person who really works at uniting teams, recently through his work, he's been working a lot on how we can stay united as communities and all get on the same page. So I think that's going to be really cool to hear his perspective in this talk. And it's especially just as we've talked about throughout the summit, how divided our country and policies and people and the polarities that are happening, and how we can kind of all come back to communicating with each other and solve some of these problems. So I'm really excited to get his perspective here. And Brandon, I'll let you take it away. So good to have you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here amongst all these great people, all these great viewers. This is a really awesome opportunity, and I think it's great for all of us. So thank you so much, Tim, and your team for putting this together. Again, my name is Brandon Turner. I am an IT guy turned entrepreneur, as Tim said. I live in the state of Oklahoma now with my wife and son. I moved here from Georgia about 12 years ago. And I have a company called Procedure Sheets. And essentially, in basic terms, we help people create jobs and build scalable businesses and get their time back. And there are several different ways that we get that started, but what we start with is we offer a subscription service called Get SOPs, where we document what you do in your business so that you can delegate the work to other people or keep your team on the same page, or both. And the title of my talk today is, Are we divided or dividing each other? This is actually an area that's a topic that's very very close to me, because it's become apparent how divided we've become and actually have always been, especially in 2020. On New Year's Eve of 2019, none of us could have predicted the events of 2020. And it's been quite a way to start a new decade. I think most of us would agree. As you all know, COVID-19, race relations, politics have stirred up intense division among people this year. This division has always been there, but it's been magnified and augmented now. News, both good and bad, travels faster than it used to. Stories that were once silenced are being heard now. And emotions we used to carry deep inside are being brought to the surface. We've all been rocked by this year, as it has brought on fears, anxieties, and challenges that many feel ill-equipped to handle. This is not the first time that we've dealt with change. I do believe our division from each other is preventing us from making the best of it. So I'd like to share a little tale. It's like a tale of two cities, but what it really is a tale of two generations. The story goes that Colonel Harlan Sanders, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, did not start his business until he was in his mid-60s. How defiant, don't you think? The idea that someone who should be thinking about retirement instead chooses to start a business, that's not normal. But then on the other end of the spectrum, excuse me, we have these millennials breaking tradition and going about life in ways that are also not normal. But is normal really a good thing? Is normal what was or is best for you? Considering the massive rift between baby boomers and millennials these days, and my personally being born into the generation between them, we lose sight of how much these two groups can share. Each generation holds wisdom and knowledge that can benefit and open the hearts and minds of the other. Each generation grew up in entirely different worlds run at a different pace than the other, has different opportunities than the other, has different challenges than the other. The one thing each and every generation has in common, however, is that we are all human beings, a species designed for adaptation and evolution. A world where many of us struggle seeing past the color of someone's skin or the political views on which they stand. This reminder that we are truly one race is prevalent in both our differences and our similarities. So think about the challenges baby boomers are facing and have faced for years. For over 20 years, since the dawn of the internet age and manufacturing going overseas, they have been asked to start over in a world that has left them behind. This is a world where their skills are obsolete and their pensions are gone and their social security is becoming non-existent. This was a world where baby boomers could graduate school and find a safe, secure job with a good company and stay with them for decades. They could then retire with a pension, social security, and maybe a savings and enjoy the rest of their lives after age 65 or so. These people were indispensable to their employers. The idea of switching careers or starting a business were almost as unthinkable as being laid off. Well, then, in the 1990s, the internet age, also known as the information age, started. And after that happened, some of our parents went from having typewriters to computers in their houses. They went from having phones attached to their walls to phones attached to their cars to phones they could carry in their pockets. The public library had computers with internet access now. People booked travel online instead of with a face-to-face agent. People in one country could communicate with people in another country without traveling. And the jobs that people used to do on our very own soil went overseas. Now, let's say you're a millennial. You grew up in this age of information. What you can look up on your phone, baby boomers had to go to the public library and check out a book for. What your kids call a hashtag, they called a pound sign. Not only do you have access to knowledge, entertainment, and people that baby boomers could never dream of, but it's all at your fingertips. None of these changes that affected baby boomers affected you the same way because they were your normal. The world you grew up in didn't have a world war with factories making weapons and vehicles for the military. You didn't grow up in a world that when that war was over, these factories started making consumer products. You didn't grow up in a world where bread was 5 cents, gas was 10 cents, and people did business on a handshake. You probably didn't grow up in a world where people got dressed up to go to the movies or the mall. No, you were born on the tail end of that era. Maybe in your childhood, you remember something called a payphone, or you used to play outside instead of on a device. Or maybe those are your parents' stories. But both you and baby boomers, the same baby boomers who believe you lack respect and values and maturity, now live in a world together where adaptation is the name of the game. You can graduate with a master's degree and still not find a job. But you can also watch TV on your phone. You can start a business and in 5 to 7 years be a millionaire. But you can also apply for and live off of unemployment. You can borrow money to buy groceries or a college education. But you can also borrow money to buy a house and rent it out to tenants. You can learn a new skill on the internet, but you can also spend your life on social media. The point is, change has always happened, and people have always adapted. It just happens faster now than it used to. If you notice, some people aren't ready for it or don't want it at all, because change means normal goes away and is replaced with something else. We don't want to adapt. And quite frankly, if you don't want to adapt, then you don't want to grow. The tragedy behind the triumph is this: some things change and some things don't. Like the fact that in 2020, we are still killing each other instead of listening to each other. Or the fact that we can come together on breast cancer awareness and veterans affairs, but God forbid you vote for the other candidate. We can come together on sports, but God forbid our athletes speak their minds. So between baby boomers and millennials, your normal was different, but you also have similarities. One such similarity is unemployment. Unemployment is a normal that millennials and baby boomers had in common long before COVID-19. If you're a millennial, you might have a degree with no job. If you're a baby boomer, you might have tenure with no job. Baby boomers they behaved a certain way back when you could trust corporations and the government to take care of you. That world worked so well, and many believed in it so much that they passed these behaviors down to their children and their grandchildren. But when that world went away and graduates couldn't get hired and loyal employees were laid off, too few people had prepared for or adapted to the change. And millions of people were then robbed of their normal. But is normal really a good thing? Is normal what was or is best for you? I once met a woman in her 50s. She quit corporate America to start a photography business. I'm going to say that again. She quit corporate America under her own volition to start a photography business. It was one of the craziest things since Colonel Sanders started KFC. But guess what? Not 2 years later, she retired on a farm in Oklahoma and has lived the life of her dreams ever since. The nerve of this woman. How dare she break tradition, leaving all that job security in a world leaving people like her behind? But instead of waiting to be left behind, she adapted, because you don't stop learning when you graduate. So is normal really a good thing? Is normal what was or is best for you? I know a millennial couple. The wife was once a nurse, and her husband worked full-time in another profession. They started investing in real estate in their 20s and became landlords before their 30s. I'm going to say that again. A millennial couple started investing in real estate in their 20s and became landlords before their 30s. Just like the 50-something woman who retired as a photographer, this couple changed their normal before it abandoned them. But you may feel like it's too late. But the fact is, it's not too late. even though it may really, really feel like it and seem like it. You may feel like the world has left you behind. You may feel like your normal was robbed from you and ripped away. You may be battling fear and ultimately the lack of hope. And maybe you're waiting on something. But the fact is, the undisputable fact is, there's always someone worse off than you. And there's always someone better off than you. The decision you have to make is, who are you competing with? Them or yourself? Picture this. Stay with me here. What if a millennial started a small business and employed a baby boomer? What if a baby boomer with a mom and pop business employed a millennial? In that case, the only thing that divides these generations is opportunity. When I say, are we divided or dividing each other? What I mean is, here's what I mean by it. Tim has white skin. I have brown skin. Technically, that divides us. So how would we divide each other, though? Well, we would divide each other if I judged him by the color of his skin rather than the content of his character, and vice versa. I could have said, I'm not going on some white man summit, because let's be real, that's how a lot of people think and how a lot of others talk. You know what's ironic about racism? It's that it doesn't care what color you are. Neither does unemployment. Neither does COVID-19 or political partisanship or what year you were born. It does not matter that you were born first, you were born next, or you were born after that. It does not matter what color you are. It does not matter who you vote for. What matters is that millions have lost their jobs in 2020. And if you own a business, want to start one, or need to go work for one, then there is still opportunity for you to change your normal. But you have to take the jump. I promise you, you will fly if you stay focused. I promise you, you will fly if you believe you can. You will fly if you change your mindset. You will fly if you change your language. You will fly if you change your actions. Yes, your normal was taken from you. But I have good news. You can either get it back or create a new one. You may feel divided. So stop being divisive and focus on what we have in common. For example, small businesses need help and people need jobs. What about the small businesses that didn't get the government funding? The millions of them. They lack money, which means it's hard to keep their doors open. But you know what also keeps their doors open? Customers. What if you are an extrovert and you're an outgoing person and you have a knack for talking to people? What if you went and talked to the business owners or the business managers and said, hey, I can bring some customers in the door for you. What do you say you give me a cut of some of the sales? Or hey, let's talk about me coming on board and joining your team and let's figure this out together. What if you're a solopreneur? You do everything by yourself. Your business is you and you are your business and your business runs you. But you like it that way. What if you decided you were a bit overwhelmed because you have the same 24 hours in a day as the rest of us? And you decided maybe you could use a hand. Maybe I should bring on somebody to help me out here. That somebody could be one of the millions of people waiting to put food on the table. That somebody can take something extra off of your plate so they can put food on theirs. Let that kind of stuff marinate. This is what I mean by opportunities, and how we can stop dividing each other and figuring out what we have in common beyond the blood that runs through our veins. The fact that we all have to sleep, we all have to eat, we all have to drink. We are all doing the same thing, which is we're trying to dig a well. We're trying to dig our own well. Your well could be finding your hope. Your well could be finding a job. Your well could be losing a bad relationship. Your well could be creating a new one. Your well could be finding something to hold on to, something to believe in, something to take hold of outside of what social media and some of the news tells you to take hold of. Your well could be getting in touch with the universe and declaring affirmations. Your well could be starting a relationship with Jesus. And the cool thing about digging a well is that all you need is the right shovel. And that's mainly what I have for you today. Again, that's
Awesome. Yeah, man. Wow. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Yeah, I love both the call, the call to action of, it's time. You got to go out there and do it. You got to go create your normal. We started off our first sort of talk of the day was basically forget the new normal, how to create a more frequent extraordinary. So I love how like some of that is continuing to tie up. We've definitely had a great theme throughout the day of watching what believing the media or watching what you take from media, really coming home to being human and connecting with other people. And I the way you talked about how we all have the same problems, like I think it just really, or the same challenges. It just really hit home. So I want to first appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, I guess from your perspective, I know you mentioned being willing to hire someone, but what is something that, that a business can do, or even anyone really can do to ensure that they're taking, that they're not being divisive?
right. So I think that it starts with a mutual understanding of what you need versus what somebody else needs. So for example, let's say that you could use a salesperson because your mom and pop store is struggling right now,
Right.
because you were looking for that stimulus, but it didn't happen. So how else are you going to get cash into the business? Well, you could try to get a loan. We know what that was like. Or you can do it the old-fashioned way and get customers. What does that look like?
Right.
Well, there are restaurants that changed their normal and started doing curbside pickup. And there are pharmacies where you would park in front of the pharmacy and somebody would come out to your car and then do what you needed to do. And a lot of businesses switched to online ordering. Are you able to do something like that? And maybe at the same time, do you need a hand with something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe somebody that was displaced from their job is in a situation where they're having to start over. Their normal was robbed from them. So what if they did something like this? What if they decided, I'm going to reinvent myself. I'm going to recreate a normal. And what that looks like for me is I'm going to go develop a new skill set. I'm going to learn how to do this thing. I'm going to learn how to edit videos, or I'm going to learn how to sell stuff, or I'm going to learn how to build websites, or I'm going to learn how to push equipment around, or whatever it is. There's a need for all of these small businesses that are struggling. These small businesses we rely on. These small businesses at the foundation of our economy. And there are a few schools of thought that I think we miss in this arena. You can start a business. It's a scary, crazy time to start a business right now, but man, what an opportunity. But there are also existing businesses. There are owners of businesses who are their businesses. They're one-person armies. They like it that way. It's been that way for a while, but now things have changed for them too. Maybe it's time that you looked at, if you are this person, maybe it's time that you looked at, why don't I bring somebody onto the team? Why don't I take something off of my plate? Because what does this mean? This means it's one less thing that you have to do, which means you get that time back while somebody else can enrich themselves with an activity, something to move their mind into a new arena, something new to challenge them, but also that puts food on the table. You know what I mean? So being in touch with the needs of somebody else and how it aligns with your needs can, it's a win-win situation for both sides, if that answers your question.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Yeah, and I guess when it comes to working on a team, and like right now we have, we're in a situation where, a lot of even political stuff is bleeding into what's happening at work, and it's like, how do you manage expectations and concepts within your employees or within your team while still trying to hold up your own values at the same time.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating because obviously certain certain topics trigger certain emotions and certain levels of emotions. For some people, when you mention a certain phrase or a word or a person, then you can go to a 10 immediately. And now you go from having a discussion to a debate to a fight.
Right.
And of course, we know what that can do to a workplace environment. The best example that I can give is an example that I have that's a personal one for me. When my wife and I met, and you know Amy, of course we go back years, but when my wife and I met, we were polar opposites politically. I come from a very liberal family, and my mother was a black sheep because she was conservative, and she passed that to me. And with my wife Amy's family, they were predominantly conservative, and she was liberal. And so it was that strange dichotomy of two worlds colliding,
Right.
And so of course we had our discussions, debates, but in that we had to understand that when we got to the point where it started escalating and we felt like a fight was coming on, we had to step back and say, wait a second, we need to, if this is going to work, we need to find some type of common ground. I can't agree with you, you can't agree with me, but maybe there's a common ground. Same thing with the baby boomers versus millennials. Baby boomers come from a normal that no longer exists, while many millennials are looking for a normal that may not yet exist. So where's our common ground? Where can we see eye to eye with each other and go from there? I think there's a different type of pandemic in society where we have it in our heads that understanding and agreement are one and the same. Like, if I understand where you're coming from, then I agree with you and I'm on your side and things like this. And I think that's something those are two things that we need to disassociate. I can understand you without agreeing with you. So if we go back to the office environment and let's say team members may be bickering or things have escalated, the reason that we have that break is because we're not listening to the other side. I don't have to agree with your views on this, but I can understand where you're coming from. I don't have to agree with your support of this candidate, or in some cases, your worshiping of this candidate, but I can understand where it's coming.
Yeah.
And obviously throughout political history, just speaking in politics, throughout different terms and eras in history, there are supporters of certain candidates that have nearly worshipped the candidate, and people on the other side are like, what are you doing? But then the switch flips when the opposing party gets in office, and it's like, we're doing the same thing. So that's another thing that we have in common is that type of passion. And when we start seeing and understanding that, I think that's what can help us build the bridge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and talking here today. It's been great being able to connect with you on this platform and in this way again. And so, yeah, just let everybody know a little bit about where they can find out more about procedure sheets and the and the other things that you have going on.
Well, first, if you'd like to connect with me, I'd love to connect with you on Facebook or LinkedIn. Is where I am. You can search for Brandon Turner Procedure Sheets or Brandon Turner, Oklahoma, because that's where I live, on Facebook or LinkedIn. And to learn more about Procedure Sheets, the easiest way is to visit our website at getsops.com. That's getsops.com. There's a little video where I share my story and how we got started, and then we talk about how we help people create jobs for other people and scale their businesses and get their time back.
Awesome, man. Cool. Well, thank you, and yeah, we'll definitely have to chat again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tim, and thank you for what you're doing, guys. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.